This is the EWN Podcast Network.
Welcome to Late Boomers, our podcast guide to creating your third act with style, power, and impact. Hi, I'm Kathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Join us as we bring you conversations with successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and people with vision who are making a difference in the world.
Everyone has a story, and we'll take you along for the ride on each interview, recounting the journey our guests have taken to get where they are, inspiring you to create your own path to success. Let's get started.
Hi, this is Kathy Worthington. Welcome to our latest episode of Late Boomers. Today we have as our special guest Sandy Stream, who is an author and activist whose work is built on the belief that everyone deserves and is capable of finding peace and warrior-like strength within themselves.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Sandy's the author of The Courage Circle, How to Live in Truth and Dare. Let's step with her into our courage. Welcome, Sandy.
Thanks so much, Mary and Kathy, for having me today. Super happy to be here with you both.
It's
Glad
great to have you.
Please tell us about your background and what led you to where you are now in your life.
What led me to my latest adventure, which is this Courage Circle, was basically a lot of suffering. So I think in general in my life, I had a lot of difficulties, but as most people I know have, most people I know have gone through all kinds of rocky roads, and I had my fair share. But I thought I was okay, more or less, until COVID times, and then things got harder again. And during that time, I just spent a lot of time, meditating, taking notes, crying, listening to talks, doing anything and everything to try to feel okay. And I started taking a lot of notes. I like to call them my sanity notes. And then they came together. And I feel at this point, anyways, that I have found for myself a way that I can navigate and feel okay in life pretty much most of the time. It doesn't mean nothing happens around or that I don't have some ups and downs, but basically I live feeling okay. And it was many pieces of the puzzle that it took to get to this point. And that's what the book is about, just a lot of those pieces. It's not one thing, just many pieces. And so I published this book, and now I've started doing circles, in-person circles in Montreal, where we discuss a lot of these topics. And it's absolutely wonderful.
Mhm. Yeah, the book is filled with wonderful wisdom, and I think that a lot of people will benefit by reading it. Can you tell us why it's important to stop demonizing your own emotions? And can you define what that means?
Yeah, I think that's one of the first, like I said, it's many pieces to a puzzle. I think for a person to start to feel well in our world the way it is right now, but one of them, maybe one of the most important, is to stop demonizing your own emotions. So this has been going on for about 5,000 years. Maybe it's about time to stop it. And our bodies have emotions, they're perfectly natural and normal. And unfortunately, we've been taught by many different directions that something is wrong with you, something's wrong with your emotions, something's wrong with what you feel. And this, for me, is actually the opposite of the truth. The truth is our emotions are normal, healthy, and guiding us, actually. So if we feel sad, instead of demonizing it and say, oh, I shouldn't feel sad, I should be grateful, I shouldn't feel this, I shouldn't feel that, maybe we look at why we're sad, accept it, feel it, and then see what we need. Maybe I need more connections or more friends, or I'm lonely, or I'm grieving something, really to understand and allow our emotions to process. So that's really important. Anger is another one. There's no like negative emotion or positive emotion. We feel angry.
Yeah, I found that part of your book very interesting. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah. So, for example, if you feel anger, it's your body. Your body is talking to you, and it's telling you something is wrong. Maybe somebody crossed a boundary or something. And so You feel angry about it. It doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want to the other person, obviously, but you're allowed to feel your anger as much as necessary in order to understand what's going on with you and to see what you might need to do. And so learning to feel our emotions for me is one of the, it's only one, but a very important step to starting to feel our own body, to feel ourselves basically. And then once we learn to process emotions, listen to ourselves better, then we start to feel life a bit differently, right? Because we're starting to feel instead of living just in the thinking head or the calculator head, as I like to call it, which is not actually here, right? The body is what's here, and that's where our emotions are, where our heart is, our guts are, and that's a way of living that's just, more self guided, in a healthier way.
Sounds great. Why
Yeah.
do you say that self love
Mm.
is not selfish?
Yeah, I think that's another one that we've been taught, directly, indirectly. There's so many messages that, came across my life and, many other people's life I've spoken to, that every time you're trying to do something for yourself that helps yourself, then there's like guilt or an association with being selfish somehow,
Mm,
right? And so,
yeah.
trying to get past that and realize, no, taking care of myself, I'm tired today and I cannot go to this event. That's not selfish. That's taking care of myself. It's actually my responsibility to take care of myself. This is not a selfish move, it's a responsible move. And so that's like, oh, an idea that we would have to really turn if we've heard this millions of times in millions of ways about doing any kind of self-care. And I don't mean just self-care like going to do, our hair. Not that there's anything wrong with just doing our hair anyways, but I'm talking about any kind of thing. Like I need to rest, or I need to be alone today, or whatever it is that I need, it's my responsibility to do so. It's not a selfish move at all.
It's
There
knowing
have
what
been
to do. Oh, go ahead,
and
Kathy.
there have been some good positive messages along those lines coming into the media now. I'm hearing
More
that
and more. Yeah.
to reinforce your
Yeah.
ideas
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
For sure. In the
Yeah.
past 10 years, it's become more, accepted that we're supposed to love ourselves. But imagine what a world that
Mhm.
you're not supposed to love yourself. So, what are you supposed to do?
Exactly. What are you supposed to do? And how do we get love from inside ourselves versus the outside?
um, yeah, it's such. How do you get love from the inside, not the outside? So, in a lot of the circles, every week I facilitate these circles where we meet at two yoga studios and we discuss different topics. And a lot of the conversations is about, every week is different, but a lot of times one thing that comes up is how we are constantly looking to the outside to, fulfill things that we don't need to look to the outside for. So one of them might be trying to always get, love from other people instead of realizing that we can have this feeling in a very deep way internally. It doesn't mean it's not nice to have others love us and care about us, but it's not something that without which then what, right? So it's something to. It's not really something to learn for me. It's just something more to realize is already there. Like it's there, right? We're capable of it to care for ourselves and just to keep giving ourselves space to take care of ourselves deeply and understand ourselves deeply every time anything happens, just to understand, oh yeah, it's true. I made a mistake today. I understand why I did that. I was overwhelmed. And that, to be understanding basically of yourself is a very powerful thing. And
I'm not sure people know what that feels like.
yeah, you're absolutely right, Mary. In one of the circles, one of the earlier circles where we talk about what it's like to actually listen to another person, not just like listen, give advice, but to truly listen in this kind of form. And after that circle, someone came up to me and I'm sure she was over 45 or 50. And she told me it is the first time in her life that she had ever felt, you know, that somebody understood her feelings. first time. Not necessarily me, the group was, right? We were all in presence there. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's not
Kind of
something
sad,
where,
huh?
and if you didn't get it from your parents, let's say, right? Which many people did not, then you're not even used to what that feels like or what that means. And so it's very hard to know what it is if you've never experienced it, in your younger life. So now you kind of have to teach it to yourself a bit as an adult. It's not too late, but we can, teach ourselves to accept ourselves and love ourselves and understand ourselves and be the source of that understanding and not always need other people to provide that. Although it's very helpful, I have to say. If you do have one or two
Yeah,
people around that are capable, it's a wonderful gift.
exactly right. And I know your book is called The Courage
Mhm.
Circle. So why do you think courage is so critical?
Well, in our world, or I don't know what our world will look like later, but in the world that it currently is, there's a lot of messages of a lot of negative messages towards us on a constant basis. And I don't mean the extreme ones only where someone, might directly say, you are a this or that or something like that. I'm talking about the constant, subtle, demeaning, people comparing each other, putting each other down in many aspects. It's a constant, environment. And so it takes a lot of courage to say no to that and say, I'm going to be myself regardless. It takes a lot of courage to, um, put boundaries. That's a very difficult thing to do in general in life, to put boundaries, where they need to be set in your own life. Some people might shun you or not accept you, or, you might even lose some relationships when you start on this path. And that takes a ton of courage as well,
Yeah.
to say, I'm sorry, that's what I feel is right for me. And that's what I'm going to do because that's what feels right for me. That's a very courageous thing to do as well. And I would say also, you often have to go somewhere you've never really been, in terms of
I
experience,
like
right? You
that.
haven't been there. Your mind might start to try to have imagination of what that might look like. And in order to move out of your current environment or whatever that is, there's a bit of faith, a little courage, like, I'm going there. It feels right. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going there. And so that takes courage too. There's a leap of faith to break out of wherever you are, without knowing exactly
Mhm.
how it's going to go. Right.
That's kind of an exciting way to look at it. And you mentioned at the outset of our podcast that you wrote the book because you were having a lot of suffering in your
Yeah.
life. So how do we stop and start with our suffering?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, so many times we think that the suffering is because somebody else is doing this and this and this to us. And it's something that I certainly was doing as well, always seeing, well, I suffer because this person is not listening well, and this one is doing this and this one is doing that. And when we start to take an approach of serious accountability and it's hard to learn not to blame other people, because for many people to learn to take responsibility, it's like you're losing points, like something is, um, less, like, oh, now it's my fault, so it's hard to leave that way of thinking and start to go into, like I said, into feeling, because the thinking, like, it compares people, right? So you're trying to always, like, there's some kind of weird point system or something in our world. Like, if I do this, I get this many points. I look like this, I get this many points. I achieve this, I get this. Like, I don't know what that point system is, but it's kind of weird. The truth is,
Mhm.
we're just human beings in our hearts, and everybody's doing whatever they can. And there's nothing wrong with anyone. That's the truth that's in a heart space, right? And so if you start to feel yourself from that space instead of this point system in the head, then you start to be able to see your mistakes and your actions and how you're participating, creating issues without blaming yourself harshly, right? You're just like, it's not internal. Whatever I've done is not me. Me is like, a deep thing. And if I make a mistake, it doesn't touch my inner being, right? When we get in touch with ourselves in that way and we feel our goodness. So we start to see how we're participating. So we're participating
Mm.
in our, we can start to look at everything that's true, right? Oh, it's true, it's true they're doing that, but I am kind of accountable a little bit, maybe 1, 2% here and there because I keep going to that person's house or I keep doing this and that, or, I'm not taking care of things in this way, or I didn't learn to forgive, or I didn't, you start to look at your own actions, your own behaviors that are contributing, even in a very, very, very small percent. It doesn't matter, but you're looking for what you're doing all the time instead of looking what other people are doing. And so this is a very nice way of stopping your own suffering by realizing how much we are actually participating in our own suffering. Um, you
Mm.
know, and
That's so
yeah.
true.
Yeah. Yeah. So true.
And you have some very interesting views about people needing to be in groups
Hmm.
or belong. Can you elaborate on that?
So in terms of belonging, I totally understand the feeling that people like to feel like they belong to groups and families and countries and whatever kind of communities. Like I understand that feeling. But at the same time, my own experience, maybe it's a personal experience, but my own experience is that, like I said, when you start to really, really feel yourself, again, it starts maybe with feeling your emotions, maybe dealing with some past traumas and all the other things. But over time, when you're always feeling yourself instead of thinking, well, you can really start to feel how you belong on this earth. So it's not about a group. You just feel you belong because you're here, right? So it's like, does a lion belong? Well, no, of course it belongs, right? Everybody belongs because they're actually here. So it's not a theoretical notion. It's like we belong because we're like nature, right? We're here. And so once you arrive at having this kind of feeling, there might not be as much having to seek being part of separate groups, even though I'm not putting that down because it could be helpful for certain experience to share experiences with specific groups or like-minded people or people with similar difficulties or anything. But ultimately, it we can still feel we belong anyways, right? And then realize that, even if we're part of separate groups, the ultimate group is humanity, right? Our main group is humanity. These are subgroups or
Ah,
subsets, whatever group you feel like,
good point.
whatever you feel like saying group, but that is a subset of the actual group. Um, so it's very hard
Yeah.
for people to realize they actually belong. And so this seeking again for someone else to give you permission to belong on this earth, again, I would say we don't need to get that from the outside.
And yet it would be so nice if our parents and grandparents parents told us that we belonged no matter where we were or what we were doing, we belonged. And that leads me to a question I had been thinking about, which is you mentioned in the book, you talk about the comfort zone versus the uncomfortable zone. So talk about that, would you? Because if you feel like you belong, then wouldn't you feel comfortable everywhere?
In a way, yeah. I mean, I do kind of, it's a funny story, but the other day I went um, with someone to a very fancy mall, and it's not my thing, right? I'm more kind of the earthy type. I'm happier in a park than in a mall. But despite the fact that, it was kind of very, very high end, I didn't feel like I don't belong there. I do feel like I belong everywhere. Like wherever I go, I'm allowed to be, or, I don't have this ranking concept going on. So it doesn't bother me in that way in terms of belonging. And so in terms of comfort of belonging, that's okay. But I think one thing that's interesting to look at comfort and discomfort zones is more like, you know, people think this is like my comfort zone as if they're comfortable in it. But the truth is, they might not be very comfortable in it. It's just the known, it's just what you know. So I almost prefer
Ah,
you call it the what I know zone And then there's unknown, right? So if I don't do this, I'm in something new. That's difficult for many people, but it doesn't mean your current, well, quote unquote, comfort zone is very good. It might be horrible. You might be like in a difficult, miserable relationship, but it's a comfort zone. So it's more a known zone, I would call it. It might be very uncomfortable and very miserable, you know?
Oh, I see, and that's interesting because you see that in books and movies like Mean Girls, where the in crowd girls are actually very miserable, but they have to be stuck in that zone
Mm,
themselves. So we are exposed to that. We should be able to understand that.
yeah. I mean, for me, what happens on the inside happens on the outside. So if somebody's mean on the outside, they're likely mean on themselves or harsh on themselves in one way or the other. So I do m- my best at trying to understand the other person, but it doesn't mean I allow the behavior so that we can separate the person and their behavior so we can understand the person. Maybe they're struggling or they don't see certain things or whatever, and not be harsh on the person, but you can still be very strict on the behavior or on the boundaries that people do and not allow them in your life. So you can still love people from far. You don't have to, have them completely in your life doing any kind of behaviors to prove you love them. You can actually love from a distance with full boundaries.
Mm.
Good.
Yeah.
And what does needing climate change mean in your book?
The climate change, so not to diminish the usual word climate change that everybody talks about it. I'm sure it's a pressing topic worthy of discussion.
Yeah.
But for me, what I feel the climate change that is, very deeply necessary is the climate in which people deal with each other. I mean, that is the change we
Mm.
really, really need. What is permitted and how we deal with each other, the climate of our togetherness. That is the change that is needed. And every person who deals with another person with respect and listening and not controlling, basically, also, that's a whole other topic that's interesting how people try to control each other. So, whenever you deal with each other in this way, this kind of impact is very big. It allows people to open and truly connect, not fake connect, but real connect. When you have this kind of environment, this kind of listening to each other, respecting each other from a different style than some people are used to doing. Yeah.
Why is it you
Oh,
think people try to control each other?
Where,
oh,
well,
a deep question as old as time.
um,
Yes, but I'm curious what Sandy would like to say about that.
I don't know the origins of law. It's certainly been the habit of the past 5,000 years I'm sure it's related to some kind of
But
fear based,
internally, why do you think?
things that we do that way are often fear based, right? So, for one reason or another, people might fear different things. But let's say, okay, I can think of one example, top of my head. For example, many parents will try to control their children in terms of what kinds of lives they're going to live, right? And that's a very common control. But that one, I'm not sure, but probably comes from their own sense of, this comparing again or not feeling good inside about who they are deeply. And so they have to live this
Mm,
out kind of through their kids. So if my kids are doctors and lawyers, therefore I'm whatever I am. It's back to this ranking, comparing point system, which is really makes no sense in my world, at least, to compare people because like, how would you compare, for example, let's say there was one guy who came once and he has social anxiety, and he managed to come to a group having social anxiety to try to whatever. Like, how many points do we give him?
Mhm.
Like, how does that work? This point system. Or let's say you had depression, and then after 3, 4 years, you're managing to take a shower. Like, did I get a point for that? Or if I smile at my neighbor, do I get points? Or is it just degrees? Like, how does that work, that point system? It's pretty nonsense in my
yeah.
opinion.
Mhm.
People are
No,
are
good one.
kind of deeply good inside and just kind of navigating their lives. And we don't really need that system, in my view.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, let's talk about the world and another age-old question. How do we create peace in the world?
My view, don't know if it's absolutely correct or not. My view, and I'm sure it's shared by many others, is that the only way to have peace in the world is to become a peaceful person yourself. It is. And so if you feel peaceful, everything around you will be impacted from that energy. And so I do feel like if every person, chooses to take the work of taking care of yourself seriously and trying to find your own peace seriously, that's really what we can try to focus on, and instead of trying to fix the wars between this country and that country or whatever else, because that won't be a permanent solution. The permanent solution is for
Mm,
Mhm.
for people internally to be at peace. And that doesn't mean not doing anything. Like for me, being at peace, it doesn't mean I'm not doing things, I'm not active, or I'm just sitting and meditating. For me, being at peace means I'm doing what I feel I need to do in my life, and I'm at ease with myself, with what I am, who I am,
Mhm.
and what I'm doing. So that's being in peace. But you can be in peace, being a vet, you can be in peace. Like it doesn't mean sitting around necessarily, right? It's more just
Mhm.
your internal feelings. So
Good. And can you talk a little bit about the courage circles that you're creating or you're teaching people to create also? And how is that going?
it's going really wonderfully. So after I published the book, I approached two yoga studios, and we do circles every week, and we discuss these kind of topics, but we listen to, every person speaks a little bit, and the wisdom comes from each person on these kind of topics and other topics as well. And the very important practice that I always start with is how to listen. So we're not listening with advising, we're not listening with comparing, we're just really listening and trying to understand. And with that kind of environment, and hopefully also loosening a little bit that point system stuff, people are very open and sharing their ideas, and it's magical. So we do this once a week, and I get very positive feedback afterwards. Like people are very happy to be in an environment where they can share of themselves, their truth, whatever it is that's going on, positive, negative, whatever is true, to share these things. And they feel connected together, which is super nice. And now
Right now that's in
it's in
Montreal. But
Montreal.
do you have a vision to spread it farther?
Well, it's interesting you're saying that, Kathy, because just last week, in talking to another person and people in the Courage Circle, they're saying, why don't you try it online, see what happens? And so that's my
Mhm.
next move, is to try to do it. Won't be the same as in person. In person is a pretty magical experience, but it'll be different
Mhm.
and it'll be unknown out of my, so out of the comfort zone, and let's
But
see what happens. So
but you'll
yeah,
be able to reach people from so
yeah,
far
yeah.
away and connect
Yeah,
people.
hopefully you'll join,
That
Kathy.
Yeah,
yeah.
I probably
Really? Oh,
will.
wow,
I
nice.
wanted to I wanted to show the copy of the book for anybody who's watching us on YouTube. Obviously, the audio podcast people can't see this, but here's the
Oh,
cover,
thanks for that.
Andy's book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we could all form our own groups too.
Yes, absolutely. So I was hoping, I don't know if anyone ever did it, but in the book I suggested, why not read the book, like put a group of people together and just talk about these topics together and see what comes out of them, about belonging or about people pleasing or about all, gather a few people
Mhm.
together, discuss them, and the book could be a bit of a guide just to get the conversation going, but then people are wise, people are wise, and they know, they feel things, and when they're open, they
Mhm.
share, and there's often a lot of wisdom that comes out from each other when we're in that open state. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. Well, talk a little
Fantastic.
bit about your writing process when you put together the book. Did you keep a diary, or how did it come about that you wrote the book?
I wasn't writing a book. I was trying to find my sanity. And so I was trying to take notes on topics that seemed like they might help me. And so I literally had papers scattered on the floor. And then if I would hear it talk and this sentence makes sense, okay, it goes in this section, and this sentence, okay, that goes with this one. And so I wasn't really I was just trying to feel better myself. But then it started
Well, how
having
long did it take?
over a year and a half, I would say, over a year and a half during COVID times. I spent a lot of time on
Mm,
meditation apps and listening to talks and reading anything and everything, and just feeling a lot also. Like I said, feeling yourself, feeling the truth, not
Hmm.
thinking, but what do I feel? What do I feel in my body? It's a whole different question than what am I thinking about. And so we're sometimes afraid to go there because when we feel, we're going to feel pain. That's part of feeling. We're going to feel sadness. We're going to feel, but they're true. And so it's usually better to go there and start to feel, start to process things than to, escape into the head basically and not feel.
Well,
Hmm.
how were you able to overcome the pain and actually go there?
Um, And people use different words by it when they talk about like leaning into pain instead of like, I'm feeling bad, like I want to get away from it. Okay, let me go have a cigarette or escape from feeling bad. You try to actually go to the feeling bad and see why, what's going on, or allow your body to do what it needs when it feels bad. There's many ways people do that. Some people do, there's these shaking things, there's yogas, there's breathing, there's screaming, there's whatever the body kind of wants to do, or crying is an excellent way to process emotions. It's our natural system to process sadness and grief and all that. So when you allow the body to do its thing, it often will find a way to release
Hmm.
these energies that you're feeling, if you go there, right? And then
And
mhm.
what would you want for the main takeaways for our listeners today, and maybe some things they could try doing today?
The one thing I like to say as a takeaway is something that I wish everybody had told me as I grew in this world is to trust yourself. Just trust yourself. It's not something we hear on a common basis. Everyone is telling everyone what to do instead of saying, well, trust yourself.
Hmm.
You know what you need to do, or what do you think? What do you want? What do you feel? Right? We don't get that message a lot. So that's the one message I'd love to pass on to people is to trust yourself.
I love
Beautiful.
that. So true. Thank you so much. Our guest today on Late Boomers has been Sandy Stream, author of The Courage Circle, and it's available on Amazon. Sandy's website is thecouragecircle.com. Thank you so much for being with us today, Sandy. And I'm hoping people begin to form their own courage circles to learn and understand about how to gain a greater happiness in their lives.
Yeah. And maybe when they log on to the website, they will be able to find out about the Courage Circles starting to happen
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
online.
Yep. So that.
We want to we want to remind our listeners also. Oop, I have a big cat joining me. We want to remind our listeners to follow us on Instagram at I am Kathy Worthington, and at I am Mary Elkins, and at Late Boomers, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Late Boomers Podcast. And on your favorite podcast platform, please subscribe also. We try to bring you something interesting each week to uplift, inspire, or entertain you. Thanks again, Sandy.
Thank you both. You're so wonderful. And I really appreciate your show, and you guys having me on.
Thank you for joining us on Late Boomers, the podcast that is your guide to creating a third act with style, power, and impact. Please visit our website and get in touch with us at lateboomers.biz. If you would like to listen to or download other episodes of Late Boomers, go to ewnpodcastnetwork.com.
This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and most other major podcast sites. We hope you make use of the wisdom you've gained here and that you enjoy a successful third act with your own style, power, and impact.